just so that we're clear, the Department for Education run by Bridget Phillipson is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. It has absolutely no understanding of children and education. How do I come to that conclusion, you ask? Well, simple. I read the spew that they churn out and I dissect it, and I see that they absolutely have no understanding of children and at school. So the latest one is they're celebrating that children are in school, attending school for 5 million more days. It's a record achievement. Their headline is, let's just get this right because we don't want to be accused of getting it wrong. So they've got a big over 5 million, there's a crown at the top of that, a big over 5 million more days in school, saving over 2 billion in future earnings. So let's just start with that bit. 5 million more days in school. Well, there's 9 million kids in education, so that's a day a child. Well done. Then we talk about the saving £2 billion in pupils' future earnings. How? What? How? How do you come to that number? How do you calculate? I mean, don't tell me because it'll be Rachel Reeves' way, so we know it's utter shit. But how do you calculate £2 billion saved in future earnings? How do you do the maths on that? How do you come to that conclusion? What numbers do you put together? What components do you put together to get to that number? Prove it. Show me. Show me the maths. Show me how you worked that out. Okay, so that's utter bollocks. So let's start with that. Let's forget that. Let's go back to the original bit, which is 5 million more days in schools for pupils. And as we've just said, that's like a day a week per kid. But we know that we're going to bring this down to groups of kids who are missing school. So what we've actually got is more parents being threatened and fined because their children don't go to school. And when I say threatened and fined, I mean threatened by imprisonment, because that's what you get if your kids don't go to school. We're cracking down. We want those kids in school because we want to indoctrinate them, no matter what their needs, no matter whether they should be there, no matter whether it's the right place and the right platform for them, we want them in school. So we'll have detention clubs and we will put kids in isolation. And 63 days is the latest I've heard of a child being in consistent isolation. Just make that clear. So we're putting kids in isolation. We're having detention clubs where we're actually praising teachers for the amount of kids they're putting in detention. We are fining parents. We are ignoring children's needs. We are ignoring why children aren't going to school. And we are using the fear policy. So that is why there's 5 million more school days. We're also ignoring the amount of children that have just said enough and their parents have said enough. So they're now being home educated because school doesn't work and there is no choice. But here's the Department for Education led by Bridget Phillipson, the woman who has absolutely no clue. No clue. Literally not a clue. She talks about free toast for kids. She thinks she's helping your children and my children with free toast, which isn't free because the taxpayers paid for it. And the schools are having to fill the gap for these breakfasts. So what are they doing? They're taking away money from the core budget. So, you know, we've lost maths programmes and Latin programmes. That's okay. There's a piece of toast for a kid that doesn't need it. That's what Bridget Phillipson thinks makes a good education. That's what Bridget Phillipson thinks makes a happy child. That's what Bridget Phillipson thinks takes a child out of poverty. She hasn't got a clue. So while she's giving kids second breakfasts that don't need it, she's also closing the budget for free school meals for the kids that actually do need it. She has completely abolished the link between free school meals and pupil premium. So when we're talking about getting kids out of poverty, we're actually doing the opposite. And then we're talking about bullying children into going into school, even though for so many of these children, school is trauma-inducing. It gives children PTSD. Now, what are we going to do? Once we finish celebrating, yay for us, we frog march these kids in against their will, against their parents' will. We told them that if they don't go to school, they're going to lose earnings in the future. We've got them in school. What happens then? Because do we think that these kids just weren't in school because they didn't fancy it or they were on holiday with their mum and dad? And if they were on holiday with their mum and dad, and that's the only time that mum and dad can afford to go on holiday, if you'd asked me a few years ago, I'd have said, come on, right now, I'm with them. Because we can't afford to breathe in this country. So if mum and dad have been able to afford a holiday for their children in term time, I'm sorry, I'm going to say that kid might learn a little bit more about family and being with family on that holiday than they would sat in a classroom full of other kids that are being forced to be there, because if they're not there, their parents are going to get fined or imprisoned. So let's have a look at what we're looking for. Let's have a look at the kind of children that are missing school. These are the neurodivergent children in the main. These are the children that have avoidance issues, that find school physically traumatizing. These are the kind of children whose needs aren't being met in school because we don't have a SEND system. We don't have any system to look after these children. So these kids don't want to go because kids are really smart. Kids are naturally very smart. Kids know what they like and what they don't like. They might not tell us how we like to hear it, but they know what they do and they don't like. So if you've got a child at home that's crying, that's shaking, that's having a trauma response about going to school, what would you do? Would you send it? Would you put that child in school? Or would you say, over my dead body, you're not going there, you can stay at home? Well, I would do the latter. My daughter missed nearly all of year 7 because it was too much for her because she is autistic. Now, you honestly think that I'm going to send her to have a meltdown in a classroom which will be traumatising for her, traumatising for everyone else in the classroom, and what will that achieve? She's been in school, tick on the register, well done. Whoa, wasn't that productive? No, it wasn't, was it? It was harmful. So we've got all of these kids that are now forced into school. Then what's going to happen? Then what happens to them next year? Then what happens to them a week later? Then what happens to them in the future when they're dealing with the trauma of what happened to them at school? Do you remember in the Victorian days when you had a child that would write with its left hand and it wasn't allowed, it wasn't societally okay. So it had its left hand tied up behind its back and it was made to write with its right hand. Yeah, that's where we're heading. That's exactly where we're heading. What Bridget Phillipson wants is your kid in a state nursery and in a state school so that she can indoctrinate it. This spew about wanting to put more money in families' pockets, wanting to help families, wanting to help parents go back to work, wanting to help children, want to include everybody in an all-inclusive mainstream school. It's utter shit. Bridget Phillipson cannot understand that the world is made up with people that are different to her. She cannot see that. All Bridget Phillipson wants is a school that can accommodate her and her kids. Well, she's got that. She's sending her children to one of the best schools in the country. She hasn't got to go to a sink school. She hasn't got kids that are going to go to school that are scared that they're going to be knifed or have their drinks spiked or be physically abused or mentally abused or watch abuse of other children. She's not worried about that because her kids don't have to put up with that. No. She's going to make sure your kids that do have to put up with that do have to see that do have to have a trauma response, she's going to make sure that by hook or by crook, they sit in that classroom because that's what she wants. Attendance has no bearing on education whatsoever. In fact, I would say the opposite, that's the word I'm looking for. I would say that if you are forced to attend a school, are you going to engage, are you going to learn, or are you going to switch off and shut down? Yep, you're right, it's the latter. So then what are you going to earn? Because you can go to your job as your employer and go, look, I went to every day at school. I haven't got any GCSEs, I haven't got any qualifications, but I sat there on my bum because I was told to, because if I didn't, my parents were going to get put into prison. So I went every day to school, but I've got no qualifications, but I'm not going to lose any money because of that, because Stephen Morgan, the Department for Education, Bridget Phillipson all said it would protect 2 billion of my future earnings. How? Nobody knows. They're best friends with Mystic Meg, who's told them from the grave that that's what's going to happen. That's where they pluck their numbers out of. This is the biggest load of tripe I have seen. It is factually incorrect, it is morally incorrect, it is societally incorrect, and it is tantamount to child abuse. And I mean that. I'm not just throwing that out and just saying it so that it's a headline. I mean it. If you've got a neurodivergent child who has avoidance issues, who cannot enter school because the entire environment is too much for them and it invokes a trauma response, to make that child go to school is abusing their rights. And that's what this country has come down to. So when the Department for Education share that on their Facebook page, and when Stephen Morgan cuts and pastes it, because he doesn't really understand what it actually means, he cuts and pastes it and put it on his page, they haven't thought it through. They have not thought through what this actual message is. This message is, by hook or by crook, we will make your child sit in class. And whether that's in isolation, or whether that's in detention, or whether that's with them crying their eyes out, or whether that's them having a trauma response, we don't care. We just want them in class because it looks better for our figures. And then we can put big 5 million signs over social media and you'll think we're good. Don't believe it. Don't buy it. Don't listen to it. It's fake. And if you do buy into that kind of stuff, you've got bigger problems than Bridget Phillipson. Everything that comes out of the Department for Education needs fact checking. Every single thing.